You're listening to the Renegade Blitz Podcast, a podcast for Steelers fans by Steelers fans. Follow us on Twitter at Renegade Blitz, read articles on renegadeblitz.com, and like us on Facebook. And welcome back to the Renegade Blitz Podcast. I'm Polk, joined by Chris Ward, and it's time for another preview episode, Steelers versus Colts this week. And we will remember the Bengals game as the game that stopped the dancing for JuJu Smith-Schuster. After a talk with head coach Mike Tomlin, JuJu announced on Twitter that he will no longer dance at midfield on opposing teams' logos before the game. And Chris, that was kind of a little bit of a discussion topic during the recap podcast. I want to get your take on this because he could do it at home, I guess, but no longer on the road.
It only became a story when they started losing. You know, the Bills players after the game said that they were motivated by it and it lit a fire under them. And then Von Bell, said the week leading up to the game, he said that, it was disrespectful. And, he delivered a big hit that caused a fumble on JuJu in the first quarter there. Just kind of, losing to the Bengals definitely doesn't help. And if you're going to dance on someone's logo and only have 3 receptions for 15 yards and, have a crucial fumble, it's not worth doing, really. It's not a good look. I don't think it was a big deal, really. It was kind of overblown, really, by everyone. But it's best just to focus on football and not have any, pregame stunts or anything like that. Because, this Steelers team right now has a ton of issues, bigger than, JuJu dancing on logos before opponents' logos before games and posting on TikTok. That's really the least of their concerns right now.
Yeah, as it stands, one interesting stat that I've seen on social media, JuJu has more TikToks than receiving yards in a game.
Yeah, I saw that one too.
That's kind of harsh, but there's a lot of good that JuJu Smith-Schuster does, and he's back at it again with doing donations to allow people to have Christmas gifts this year, and it's one of the many good things he does in the community. He said he wanted to stay in Pittsburgh for another 4 years. So, hey, there's a lot of good that comes with JuJu Smith-Schuster, and maybe this can get him a little bit more focused on the game, and he can kind of quiet a lot of the people, not only around town, but really just around the league on his, I wouldn't even say it's diva behavior. It's not diva at all. This is just a guy out there having fun.
Yeah, JuJu's a social media influencer, and he told the media that he doesn't get paid by TikTok to post those videos. I think he just has a big following. He likes to engage with his followers and have fun with everything. And like I mentioned, it only became an issue when they started losing.
Yeah, there wasn't anything said by the Cowboys whenever the Steelers beat them then, and I'm trying to remember if there was any other situations like that on the road for the Steelers during the long win streak in which people felt some kind of way about it. So when you lose, everyone's got a problem with everything. That's just how it is in Pittsburgh and largely around the league. It's time to get an update on the injury and COVID list for the Steelers. And the Steelers are getting back Vince Williams for this matchup against the Colts, and it's much needed.
Yeah. Williams coming back is huge, especially, when it comes to defending the run. He's a great run stopper. But Eric Ebron suffered a back injury against the Bengals on Monday night. He didn't practice on Wednesday, but was a full participant at practice on Thursday. James Conner had a quadriceps injury, and fullback Derek Watt, who suffered that concussion early in the first quarter against the Bengals. That was a scary moment there. And he was a full participant today, so that's good news. It's still unclear if he's in the concussion protocol or not, but Kevin Dotson shoulder injury was a full participant also, so that's good. He might start there at left guard, or he's on the right track right now to start at left guard. And then inside linebackers Marcus Allen, who had a stinger, Ulysses Gilbert III had an ankle injury, Ola Adeni with the shoulder, and defense end Stephon Tuitt with the back. They all didn't practice today for the second consecutive day. So that's something to watch there, especially with, the inside linebackers. And then Tuitt also, they need Tuitt, especially for this game against the Colts.
Any healthy bodies will be appreciated. And before we talk to our guests, what's the betting line for Steelers versus Colts? I imagine the Steelers are the underdogs going into this game.
Yeah, right now they're only 1.5 point underdogs, so it's pretty close margin there. But the way they've been playing, they definitely deserve to be underdogs. And the Colts have been playing really good lately, really.
Well, let's hear more about those Colts with our next guest. And we're glad to have on Matt Taylor, the play-by-play voice of the Indianapolis Colts. Matt, thank you for coming on.
My pleasure. What's going on with you guys?
Again, processing a 3-game losing streak, but, aside from that, it's always good to have people on the podcast.
The NFL is a marathon, man, and weird things happen. I mean, the Jets go out to Los Angeles and get a win. The Bengals, obviously, playing with some pride. I mean, the Houston Texans, to kind of correlate this to the Colts, the Texans, we saw them twice in 3 weeks, and their team that's 4-10, but they came within a combined 4 yards of sweeping the Colts this season. The Colts are fortunate that it happened the other way where they got the sweep, but they've been in a ton of tight games this season as well. I think they've lost 6 games this season by 1 score. So it's the NFL. It can happen, and I think they're fine. The Pittsburgh Steelers are fine. They're still 11-3. For my money, still one of the best teams in the AFC. So I think they're going to rebound here, and it should be a really, really good game coming up on Sunday at Heinz Field.
Absolutely. It's a game of inches, as they always say. And this is the second straight year that the Colts have made a trip to Heinz Field. And, of course, this matchup has a lot more stakes involved for it, as both teams are in danger of losing their division and starting the playoffs on the road. As it stands, these two teams will meet again in round 1 in Pittsburgh. How confident are you in the Colts making a run through the playoffs?
Well, I think they're playing some really good football right now, especially on offense. If you look at their numbers since about week 6, when they had maybe their biggest speed bump of the season, when they fell to the Cleveland Browns, since then, they've won 7 of 9. They're on a 3-game winning streak for the second time this season. Offensively now, they're a top 10 team in both points, yards, also total yards when you throw in that, and then passing yards. I mean, Phillip Rivers right now is playing at just an elite level, and he's really, I think, played above expectations from when the Colts signed him back in March in free agency. I think you could say that in terms of production on the field, also kind of the intangibles off the field inside the locker room, what he's brought in terms of being a leader. So I'm really confident right now with the Colts' ability to not only get in the playoffs, but make a run when they get there. I mean, I don't think there's just not a whole lot of teams that scare you, to be honest with you. I mean, I know Kansas City's playing kind of at a different level, but I mean, even last year we saw the Colts go on the road at Arrowhead, in full capacity back when crowds were allowed to be there, and Sunday Night Football, and it was a crazy environment. The Colts went in there and got their biggest signature win on the road of the 2019 season. So, there is a blueprint to even beat the Chiefs with this Colts team, who I think is really put together very well. There's not a whole lot of holes on this team. I think they're one of the most, solidly put together units in the league. And that goes for both sides of the ball, offensively, defensively. They just have a ton of depth. And I don't know anybody that wants to play the Colts right now at the end of the season and then in the month of January if they make the playoffs.
Yeah, and the one thing about those Colts, the last 6 weeks, they've averaged 31.8 points per game, the best in the NFL over that strand, and overall 8th in the league when you amount the entire season. How has Phillip Rivers provided stability to a Colts offense who last year, for Steelers fans, we had to see both Jacoby Brissett and Brian Hoyer?
Yeah, it's a huge upgrade. It really is. Last year, talking about the season that was, the Colts were in all reality, a top 5 rushing attack. And, they lost some really unique games last year in the sense that, they would run for 150 yards. They would win the turnover battle. They would win time of possession. They would create some takeaways, and they would still lose. And that's hard to do. And a big reason why is because they just weren't efficient inside the passing game. They were 30th in passing overall. They were 30th in explosive plays in the passing game. So it kind of reared its ugly head. They had some problems on on fourth down and the kicking game as well with Adam Vinatieri. That was on full display last year, by the way, at Heinz Field, where the Colts missed a PAT. They also missed a field goal at the end that kind of doomed them. They left some points on the board as far as that goes. So, you combine all those things, and all that kind of wrapped up into one, netted the Colts a 7-9 season here so far this year. I mean, you talk about the Colts being, a really good offensive team. As you said, they're 8th in points this year. They're 9th in passing yards per game. They're 12th in total offense. But the biggest thing is they're so much better. They're so much more efficient with Phillip Rivers in the passing game. The explosive chunk plays are back, and that was a big thing this offseason. Frank Reich spoke at the end of 2019. It was a really tough pill for him to swallow, just being that inefficient inside the passing attack. But this year, they have 50 explosive plays in the passing game. That's tied for 6th. They have so many weapons. That's the thing about this offense that's so unique. It's kind of like, if you go back to 2017, when Frank Reich was the offensive coordinator for the Philadelphia Eagles, the year they won the Super Bowl. The Colts this year on offense, they kind of operate the same way, where, they don't have a 100 or a 1,000 yard rusher or a 1,000 yard receiver, but they've got, 10 to 12 guys that collectively can just give you nightmares because they just take advantage of the matchups. T.Y. Hilton the last couple of weeks is starting to break out. But in weeks past, it was guys like Michael Pittman having a 100-yard receiving game, or Mo Alley Cox having a 100-yard receiving game, or, Marcus Johnson breaking out for a 100-yard game. So, it's kind of pick your poison on how you want to slow down the Colts. If you don't want to stack the box, Jonathan Taylor can rip off 150 yards, which he did against Vegas a couple of weeks ago. So they are very much a spread it out, spread the wealth type of an offense. And it's netting them some huge success, especially with how productive, and again, I just go back to that word efficient, that Phillip Rivers has been this season. The turnover numbers are down. The interception numbers are way down, not only from last year, but at the beginning of the season as well. He hasn't turned the football over in 3 straight games. So he's just being really smart with the football, and he just knows where to go with it seemingly at all times. And he's just so pinpoint accurate, 78% completion percentage the other day against the Houston Texans. And so when you have a guy on offense at quarterback that's playing as well as he is, he kind of elevates everybody else around him. And that's why you're seeing so many kind of solid role players, like I talked about with Zach Pascal, Jack Doyle, Trey Burton, Michael Pittman, Mo Alley Cox. All these guys combined, they add up to a really big thing. And that's what the Colts are doing right now, scoring a lot of points, and it's spread it out. It's kind of a big committee approach here in 2020 for the Colts offense.
And that Rivers is a fellow member of the 2004 draft class with Ben Roethlisberger. As you mentioned, he's been steady and is in a 7th in completion percentage, 9th in yards per attempt, 10th in passer rating, and 12th in total passing yards. Did you think he would be such a nice fit for the Colts when he signed in March?
Yeah, I did. And a big reason why, just to go back a little bit in free agency, obviously the pandemic was in its infancy and, late February and March, right around the time of free agency. And it was just a really unique situation for the Colts to go out and get him because, obviously they wanted to upgrade over what they had at quarterback last year. But at the same time, they had this window of opportunity. They knew that, hey, even though we don't have Andrew Luck anymore, we still have this roster that's been built so well and constructed so well for the last 3 or 4 seasons under Chris Ballard. Most of their impactful guys are here. The core players are, on their rookie contracts, so they're under financial control, which gives the Colts, again, this window of opportunity to kind of go for it. So that's why they've married Phillip Rivers with this team. And so they're kind of, trying to win now and take advantage of their win now approach. But it was a very unique situation for the Colts to be in because it's not often that you're able to sign a quarterback that has Hall of Fame credentials on his resume. Those guys just don't come available very often. And so it's a 1-year deal for Phillip. And, the spirit of the deal, as they've said in the offseason, is for it to be a multi-year thing. Hopefully, he plays well these last couple of games. They make the playoffs, maybe make a decent run. They re-sign him for 2021, giving them even more time to figure out what they do long-term at quarterback. I think that's kind of the ideal goal or the ideal scenario here. But, it was, okay, we don't know what the offseason is going to look like. We don't know if there is going to be an offseason. We don't know if the season's going to start on time. We don't know what the preseason looks like. There's all these things that are just kind of out of our control right now. We know we need to get better at quarterback. But with Frank Reich and their offensive coordinator, Nick Sirianni, all of these guys had familiarity with Phillip. They were all together for a couple years with San Diego with the Chargers. Frank was the OC. Sirianni was the quarterback's coach. Those couple of years, Phillip Rivers had some of his best years in the NFL in terms of production and consistency. So they knew what they were getting with Phillip. So they knew him, he knew them, and it was the same kind of offense. They said in the offseason that before he even steps in the building or before he even opens the playbook, he knows 85 to 90% of it already. It's just kind of these little tweaks and changes that they've made to the offense, kind of modified it over the years. So all of those things kind of combined went into it being kind of a slam dunk for Phillip to come over in free agency because there was just all of those unknowns. So let's kind of not play it safe, so to speak, but we know who our guy is. Let's not mess around with it. Let's go get this guy because we know the ins and outs of him. We know what makes him tick. We know the consistency that he's shown throughout the course of his season. So let's go get him. And the Colts were very aggressive in doing that. They paid $25 million for him in the offseason. So it's, kind of the price tag is not necessarily a huge deal because it's a 1-year contract. So it's not killing you in terms of, the duration. But again, I just go back to it's very much working out right now because the Colts knew what they wanted in Phillip. Phillip's giving him that and more. And I would not be surprised at all if this turns into a 2-year deal. And I don't think there's any reason to think that, what he's doing now can't be replicated at age, 39, 40 in 2021.
Wow. And one thing that has really helped Rivers is, again, that receiving game. There are 7 receivers, and that's between running back, wide receiver, and tight end, that have recorded at least 250 yards on the season. T.Y. Hilton is the lead receiver, but guys like Zach Pascal, aforementioned Michael Pittman Jr., and Mo Alley Cox have also caused havoc to secondaries. Who do you think will be the guy that Rivers will lean on the most against the Steelers?
I don't know. I mean, that's the thing about this offense. It is a week-to-week proposition. A couple of weeks ago, again, T.Y. Hilton going into last Sunday's game against Houston, he was over 270 receiving yards in his last 3 games, had 4 touchdowns. T.Y. Hilton was doing T.Y. Hilton things to the Texans. That's one of the teams he just torches over the course of his career. And so they played 2 weeks ago and on December the 6th, had a big game, had 110 yards and a touchdown down at NRG Stadium in Houston. And so fast forward 2 weeks later when the Colts have to play him again in Indianapolis, they're rolling over, they're putting their best corner on him. They're rolling safety and coverage his way. They're even, trailing a linebacker over to him as well. So you're dedicating a lot of resources to stopping T.Y. Hilton. And so what happens? It's Zach Pascal goes off for the best game of his season. He had 5 catches, over 70 yards, and 2 touchdowns. That's sort of the MO of this offense. Again, not to beat a dead horse, but heading into a game, heading into a given week, you don't know who's going to rise up. It's simply the matchups, and Phillip Rivers is so good at just identifying, what teams are trying to do, what they're trying to take away, and then exploiting a different area. I go back to week 2 against Minnesota. It was Mo Alley Cox breaking out for a 100-yard game. A couple weeks ago against the Baltimore Ravens, it was Michael Pittman breaking out. There's sort of been like a star of the show, so to speak, week to week for the Colts defense, or the Colts offense rather, and it kind of changes up based on the matchups. And so that's the fascinating thing about this team. They have, I think, 3 really star players, like 3 really go-to players that can burn you. If you're a defensive coordinator and you're mapping out the game plan on a Tuesday night to slow down the Colts. I think the three guys you identify that you have to slow down, that you're not going to let beat you, you got T.Y. Hilton, Jonathan Taylor, and Nyheim Hines. So if you formulate a good game plan to slow down those three guys, like I said, the Colts still have a really good cast of characters that can collectively beat you, like Jack Doyle and Trey Burton. And, the tight end spots, obviously, Nyheim Hines can catch the ball and run the ball out of the backfield. If you don't stack the box, it's Jonathan Taylor ripping off 6 yards per carry. So this is just a very good, well-rounded Colts team that simply just doesn't beat itself. Not a lot of penalties, not a lot of turnovers. Guys make the plays when they come to them. So it's going to be a really good matchup. I think it's good on good, strength on strength. Colts offense against that Steelers defense that's so opportunistic, and they do such a good job of just getting their hands on the ball with the sacks, the tackles for loss, the batted down passes, the flat out strips, the fumble recoveries. That's a really opportunistic group. So it's strength on strength, because the Colts don't beat themselves. They take care of the football, but yet the Steelers, they give up maybe some points. They maybe give up some yards, but what I call them, they're like the disruptive group. They're the defense that, that they might be bending. They might be bending, not breaking. But all of a sudden, boom, they get you off schedule with 2nd and long or 3rd and 13 by making a tackle for a loss or batting down a pass, get you into long down and distances, kind of screwing you up a little bit. So that's what the Colts have to be weary of heading into this game, is staying on schedule and just take what the defense gives them, but also, don't be careless with the football. Be tight with it at all times, because the Steelers are so good at just making those little mistakes turn into big plays for them on defense.
And like you mentioned, Matt, there's a real good running back depth in Indianapolis with Jonathan Taylor, Nyheim Hines, and you have Jordan Wilkins also there. Taylor and Hines have been really good in the passing game as well. The Steelers have generally been really good against the run, but they did give up 152 yards rushing against the Bengals last night. How do you expect the running backs to be used in the passing game? And how do you think the Colts will fare well against the Steelers' run defense?
Well, I think consistency is the name of the game for the Colts. And, back in 2018, they kind of formed this identity when Frank Reich got here. They were going to be, a team that was going to win in the trenches. They were going to run the ball first. They were going to run to set up the pass. And at the beginning of the season, it kind of went in reverse, where they passed to set up the run. The Colts were a really good situational running team. They would run the ball well on, 2nd down and long to get them back into 3rd and manageable, or they would be a really good, 4-minute offense trying to salt a game away, get a couple of first downs, grind out some clock, that kind of thing. But they're running pretty well here lately, and they're starting to become one of the best running offenses in the last half of the season. They've been over 100 yards in 7 of their last 8. They're averaging 126 yards in that span. So that's what they want to be. They want to be, Frank Reich says all the time, if you can rush for 125 yards a game, throw for around 250, hover around 400 yards, and score 26, 27 points per game, man, you're going to win a lot of games. You're going to be really hard to beat. And that's what the Colts have done here consistently the last couple of weeks. So I think they should be able to run the ball. Hopefully they can against Pittsburgh. But that being said, the Colts, they're not, one of these teams. Frank Reich is not one of these play callers as an offensive coordinator and head coach where he's just going to bang his head against the wall if it's not working. He's going to adapt, and he's going to go to plan B. And like I said, plan B is pretty good with all the weapons on the outside in the passing game. So, they might set up some things as extensions of the running game if the flat-out running game's not working. But, Jonathan Taylor's really kind of in the zone here in his rookie season, kind of had a speed bump month of November. He's kind of smoothed that all out a little bit in the last couple of games. He's over 80 rushing yards in each of the last 4. And like you guys said, he's a really good weapon out of the backfield in the screen game or, in the dump downs by Phillip Rivers. So I think the running backs will play a huge part of this game like they always do for the Colts. And then you got a guy like Nyheim Hines on 3rd down, the 2-minute, where he's just kind of a nightmare in space with the ball in his hand. So, yeah, those two guys are going to play a big factor in this game, and I think Jonathan Taylor should be able to, maybe not get 100 yards, but should be good enough, in the efficiency category where he's over 4 yards per carry and where the threat of the run helps out the passing game for the Colts.
There's a lot of similarities between this Colts and Steelers team. As I mentioned, those 7 receivers with 250 yards at least on the season. The Steelers also have 5 of their own. And also, the Colts are the second fewest sacked team in the league, giving up 16, and only the Steelers are better. Are there any similarities or differences in the way that Indianapolis protects Rivers from getting hit? Like, do they have a short passing game, stuff like that?
Quick rhythm. And, a lot of it is the great offensive line. The backs protect very well. Speaking of Jonathan Taylor, he has really improved his pass protection here as of late, as the season has progressed. But a lot of it, to be honest with you, is Rivers. Again, knowing where to go with the football. A couple of weeks ago when Anthony Costanzo went down at left tackle, Rivers kind of identified that, knew that, I need to get rid of the ball maybe even quicker in a game like this where I have, where I'm down to my third string left tackle and I kind of take Anthony Costanzo for granted, so to speak. So, normally Rivers is a guy that has a quick release anyways, around 2.5 seconds from snap to release. But that game a couple of weeks ago, it was down to like 2.34. So he is a big reason why the sack numbers are down. And schematically, that's what this offense is under Frank Reich. That's really what it's designed to do. You go back to 2018 with Andrew Luck, the sack numbers were kind of in the same ballpark. The Colts were a top 3 team in allowing the fewest sacks. That's because, again, Luck knew where to go at the football a lot of the times. And so when you have a guy that's played in the NFL for 16, 17 years, there's just not a lot that's going to confuse him. So that's I think the biggest thing that's factored into the sack numbers being down is just Rivers, identifying what his best matchups are quickly at the line of scrimmage, getting the ball out in space to his playmakers. But that being said, you're talking about an offensive line here that, the Pro Bowl announcements came out just last night, and the Colts have 2 Pro Bowlers and really could have had more. On that offensive line I'm talking about, the right tackle, Braden Smith, I think is one of the best young right tackles in the game. Anthony Costanzo has been in the NFL now for 10 years. We call him around here the Rock of Gibraltar because he's just so solid. You don't have to, help and protect and focus extra attention his way. So there's no doubt that they have one of the best offensive lines in the game, and their calling card is pass protection. Secondly, it's run blocking, but there's no doubt about it. Their hallmark is pass protection. Rarely do you see Phillip Rivers in trouble, and if he does, he's doing a good job lately of throwing the ball away or just taking a sack, whereas in the beginning of the season, he was trying to, make a home run play, make a home run throw off his back foot, trying to just extend it for as long as he could. That idea is kind of out the window now with Rivers, and that's led to the turnover numbers being down and just the efficiency numbers continuing to be there all season for Phillip.
Going to talk about the Colts offensive line, just how this is probably is the Steelers' best offensive line that they'll face this year. The Steelers lead the league in sacks with 47, but Quentin Nelson and Ryan Kelly, as you mentioned, both Pro Bowlers, and Cam Hayward had a play on Nelson last year where he he bull rushed him into Jacoby Brissett, and he got injured on the play, and it was like a big media thing because both Hayward and Nelson are one of the best players in the league. But that should be a good matchup on Sunday.
Yeah, I agree. I remember that play, and that's the play that Jacoby got hurt on and kind of sprained his MCL, didn't play the week after that against the Miami Dolphins, who back then, 2019, the Dolphins weren't very good, and they came into Lucas Oil Stadium the week after the Colts played the Steelers, and they won. And so that was kind of like the play or, the play that kind of derailed the Colts season, because at that point the Colts were 5-2, in the middle of or late October, early November. And at that point, the Colts were the number 2 seed in the AFC playoffs. And you're thinking, okay, wow, this is going to be a great year. And then, that game kind of slipped away. The Colts got out to a decent lead and, ultimately lost 26-24 with a backup quarterback and a lot of guys banged up and not playing. So that's an opportunity missed if you're a Colts fan. Again, you think back to that game where the kicking problems reared their ugly head. You had some turnovers. Brian Hoyer threw a pick six in that game. That's kind of the play that kind of screwed everything up and got the rest of the season kind of off kilter a little bit. So no doubt that is a fantastic matchup inside the trenches. And if you're a guy like Quentin Nelson, with the mental makeup that he has, he wants to be perfect. He wants to be, just considered the best of all time in his position. So to get kind of taken advantage of on that one play by Hayward, and a lot of people like us are still talking about it over a year later, there's no question in my mind that he's thinking about that in the back of his mind heading into a really important game for both teams.
For the Colts on the defensive line, it all starts with DeForest Buckner, who's been outstanding for the Colts after Indianapolis acquired him through a trade this offseason. Buckner is tied for the team lead in sacks with 7.5, along with Justin Houston and Danico Autry. What have people been saying in Indianapolis about the addition of Buckner and the overall play of the defensive line?
Night and day. It's night and day. DeForest Buckner is by far the best defensive tackle the Colts have ever had. I mean, that's just it. I mean, it's just simply put, when he's not out there, you notice. And that's the biggest compliment I think anybody can give him. He was on the COVID-19 list a couple of weeks ago. He was a close contact guy. Did not play against the Tennessee Titans. It was horrible timing. Tennessee came in. Both teams were tied for the division. So the winner of that game was essentially going to take a 2-game lead in the division inside the AFC South, because the winner of that game was going to hold the tiebreaker as well. Derrick Henry comes in, rushes for $178. Tennessee puts up 35 points in the first half. Not a lot of pressure on the quarterback, Ryan Tannehill. It was again just night and day without DeForest Buckner. I think he makes just that big of a difference for the Colts defensive line. We were talking a couple of weeks ago, just an incredible stat. I don't know what it is now because I haven't seen it updated, but 2 weeks ago the Colts had 18 takeaways. They've got 24 now. So this is 2 games ago, but at the time they had 18 takeaways on the season. All 18 of them occurred when DeForest Buckner was on the field. 0 of them occurred when he was on the sideline. So he just creates all kinds of pressure from the inside. We know how, I think, improved interior pass rush has become in the NFL in the last 4 or 5 years. I mean, defensive linemen now are so much more, they're faster, they're quicker, they're stronger, and interior pass rush just screws up all kinds of quarterbacks. They don't know where to go with the football. They can't step up into the pocket. And that's exactly what DeForest Buckner does. He helps every layer of the Colts defense. Obviously, it helps the pass rush, helps the linebackers scrape free because of the double teams that he creates. It's going to help the guys in the back end not have to cover as long. The Colts are, they have 15 interceptions on the season. That's second only to Pittsburgh. And so it's a trickle-down effect with everybody involved on defense with DeForest Buckner on the field. And so, he was banged up a little bit last week with an ankle, got banged up in practice on Thursday, was on a limited pitch count in the game on Sunday against Houston. But even on a limited role where he was, primarily a third down specialist, kind of a red zone guy, even in that capacity, he got 3 sacks, 2 tackles for loss. So he, just absolutely he got gypped out of the Pro Bowl. I'm not sure how that happened because among defensive tackles, he's second in sacks, second in tackle for loss, and second in quarterback hits. And that's still not good enough to make the Pro Bowl. I simply don't understand it. But again, to kind of put an exclamation point on the conversation, without a doubt is the best defensive tackle the Colts have ever had. And Chris Ballard, he knew he needed to upgrade that position big time because it kind of drove the bus for the Colts defense in a 4-3. And so he was very aggressive in trading the 13th overall pick to San Francisco back in the draft to get a guy that's already kind of a superstar at his position. And he's young. He's only 25 years old.
The Colts rank 5th in run defense, allowing only 98.1 yards per game. They are the best in the AFC when it comes to stopping the run, and they match up pretty well against the Steelers' rushing attack that ranks 31st in the league, averaging only 88.9 yards per game. So What's with the Colts in terms of run defense? Is it scheme, or obviously is it talent with guys like Buckner on the team?
Yeah, I think run defense has been pretty consistent all season long. They're giving up less than 100 yards per game. And, they're in year 3 of this defense with Matt Eberflus. And, the kind of the core identity of this team is just fast. It's quick. They fly to the ball. And, Matt Eberflus, not to get too inside football with you, but, he's a disciple of Rod Marinelli. And they've developed this system of loafs, as they call it, and they watch film together as a defense, and they hand out what they call loafs. And they don't try to embarrass guys in a film session, but they like to call guys out. They like to say, hey, are you giving 110% maximum effort on every play? And if you're not, they hand out a loaf, and a loaf is meant to spur you kind of light a fire under you a little bit. And that's what this defense does. I mean, if you just watch them, if you're just a casual football fan, like let's say you turn on, the Colts and Bears, and you're watching a game from Florida and you don't have a dog in a fight, you would probably come away saying, man, the Colts, they fly around. These guys are fast. All 11 guys to the football on every single play. And I think that's a big reason why they've created so many takeaways is, the first guy's going for the tackle, the next guy's coming in trying to finish off the play, going for the strip, and then the next guy after that are going for the fumble recovery. So that's a big reason. That's kind of the big identity of this team. But taking it a step further, again, the core of this team has been, put together by Chris Ballard. They've drafted very well. They've drafted a lot of guys on the defensive side of the ball, and they just kind of know this defense like the back of their hand now. It's not a complicated scheme. Like I said, it's a 4-3, primarily a cover 2. So it's not exotic. It's not complicated, but they play it pretty well, and they're really good inside the red zone. And like I said, they give up some yards. They might give up some points, but they kind of negate all of that with red zone defense and the takeaways. And, we saw that the other day against Houston where, they were over 400 yards of offense. Deshaun Watson threw for 373, but they only scored 20 points and the Colts won the game.
And at linebacker, the Colts have another premier player in Darius Leonard. Leonard leads the team in total tackles with 109. And he's just a playmaker. When you really look at the Colts defensive roster, they have standout players at every level of the defense. And along with Leonard, what have you seen from the linebackers this year?
Yeah, they have Leonard. They've got Anthony Walker, who is incredibly consistent, very smart. He's rarely out of place, rarely misses a play. Bobby Okariki's a young guy in his second year, and they have a tremendous amount of confidence in him. And then, they've got some depth pieces as well. Guys from a couple years ago that were drafted, and Matt Adams, Zaire Franklin, EJ Speed is a Division II guy that has all kinds of raw potential and a lot of upside. So linebacker position I think is a big strength of their team. And as you said, there's depth, there's game changers at every level on this defense with a guy like Justin Houston who has 7.5 sacks, and we talked about Buckner with 7.5 as well, and Danico Autry at the other defensive end position, he's got 7.5 sacks. It's funny that the Colts and the Steelers are one of only 3 teams in the NFL to have 3 players with at least 7.5 sacks. So this is going to be a really good game on defense on both sides of the ball. But then in the back end, the Colts are really good there too. Rock Yassine's a good up-and-comer. Julian Blackmon might be in the conversation, a little bit of a dark horse at this point for, defensive rookie of the year, a guy that tore his ACL last year coming out of college. Played corner and safety a little bit in Utah and is having a terrific year playing safety for the Colts in year 1. And then Xavier Rhodes, who was a major kind of question mark in the offseason. Like, hey, why did the Colts make that move? And, not necessarily free agency because he was waived by Minnesota, but the Colts claimed him early on in the free agency period. And you're thinking, all right, how's this going to work? Because he had a couple of down years. But, man, he's a major reclamation project here for the Colts. He's got a couple of picks, got a pick 6, really good in coverage. From a play-by-play standpoint, we just don't talk about this guy. We don't bring up his name all that often during the course of a game because nobody's throwing his way. That's how good he's been here in 2020. So the Colts are really solidly put together, as I said, on the defensive side of the ball. And, they play the scheme well, they play the system well, and they don't give up a lot of things deep. They keep most of the stuff in front of them, and they're a really tough out inside the red zone.
Yeah, and there's one guy you didn't mention. It's Kenny Moore II. He leads the team in interceptions with 4. And overall, the defense has 15 interceptions this year, which is third most in the league. What has this pass defense been like to see in Indianapolis?
Yeah, they don't give up a lot of big plays. And then that's the thing. They come up well, they tackle well. Their corners are some of their best tacklers. You brought up Kenny Moore. He is a great open space tackler. He is, I think, the best nickel corner in the league. The Colts dropped off big time late in the season last year when he was out with an ankle injury. Offenses, opposing quarterbacks just kind of torched the Colts late in the season without him on the field. And he just allows the Colts to be multiple, be a little bit flexible in terms of personnel and what they can do schematically when he's on the field versus when he's out of the game. I think he's probably the most unsung hero that this division has, in my opinion, in the AFC South. I think he's that important to the Colts defense, and nobody, and I mean this as a compliment to him, nobody gets more out of their, body. Nobody gets more out of their, physical stature than Kenny Moore. He's like 5'10", 185 pounds, but he plays like a guy who's 6'1", 200 because, he's just incredibly athletic. He's instinctual. He's always in the right spot. I mean, we saw a couple weeks ago, he climbs the ladder and the vertical to go up and grab a ball one-handed in the end zone and snatch a touchdown away from Darren Waller against the Raiders was just simply sensational. So it's plays like that. He's a really good blitzer off the edge, and the Colts utilize him a lot in that capacity. So this pass defense is really pretty good. I know they've given up a lot of yards here lately, but they're starting to play some really good quarterbacks, and so that's a little bit concerning when they go up against a guy like Ben Roethlisberger, who's had a tremendous amount of success during his career against the Colts. So that's going to be put to the test in this game, and so I think that's another layer of this ball game that's going to make it really fun. And the Colts are going to have to play, I think, their best game defensively this year to get the win, because I know things are going bad right now for Pittsburgh, but you can't keep them down for long when they have that many weapons like, Schuster and Claypool, and the list kind of goes on and on for them. So I fully anticipate and expect them to rebound and play a good game against the Colts.
And Matt, you mentioned earlier about the Colts turnover differential. They're tied for first in the league right now with plus 12 with 24 takeaways and 12 giveaways. So they're just really playing really great football on both sides of the ball. Do you see this Colts team as of right now? Do you think they can make a deep playoff run, or is it too early really to say right now?
No, I think they can, because, again, I think out of every team in the AFC, I think they are – how do I put this? I think they are the closest to the complete team. Obviously, I think some pieces are – I think some areas are a little bit deeper than others, obviously, but there's not a weakness on this team. There's not a part of this team that says, yeah, but like this area, like this part of the game is going to get us beat if we're not careful. Like you don't say that about the Colts. Kansas City's defense has been up and down a little bit this year, and so they have a little bit of a tragic flaw. I think all of these teams in the AFC have a tragic flaw. I don't think you say that about the Colts. I think, obviously some games they perform better than others. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying they're the perfect team, but I'm saying out of every playoff contender in the AFC, the Colts might be the best, put together. They just have the solid roster. There's not a lot of holes. I don't think there are any holes, to be honest with you. Again, deeper in other areas than some. I think obviously at receiver they're strong. Defensive line, they're very strong. Linebacker, very strong. And the secondary might be a little bit thin once you get past their frontline guys. But I just say the Colts are just a very well put together team, and that's a testament to Chris Ballard and his staff, the GM. He's been just pinpoint accurate on the draft picks. He's been very prudent in free agency. He's spent well. He's brought in guys that fit the culture. So I think if the Colts make the playoffs, maybe they don't win their division because Tennessee has a little bit of a leg up as far as that goes. But if this team makes the playoffs and they have to go on the road and play somebody, I wouldn't want to play the Colts because you got to play a pretty clean game to beat the Colts. I just think they're that deep, and as long as they don't beat themselves, they should be in just about every game.
So what's your biggest concern for the Colts in this game?
Well, I think that's to be determined a little bit, because we got to find out who's available. We're going to find out who can play. I think just on the surface, it's slowed down the passing game. Obviously Pittsburgh's a little bit one-dimensional right now on offense. They've sort of abandoned the idea of running consistently, 20, 25 times per game. So as long as you don't let, Schuster go off on you, Johnson go off on you, or Claypool go off on you, I think the Colts should be in a decent shape to win this football game. So I would say right now, 4 or 5 days ahead of the game, I would say just don't get beat deep in the passing game. Don't let Roethlisberger get comfortable. Somehow you got to find a way to get after him with that great offensive line that they do such a good job of protecting in the passing game. Generate a little bit of a pass rush to the extent where, he's not able to just carve you up in the passing game. I think that's the biggest thing, is just get him off his spot just a little bit so you can take advantage of the matchups in the passing game.
And Matt, I know we're still early in the week here, but do you have a prediction for the game?
Yeah, I don't make predictions.
Okay.
I've looked foolish enough over the course of my time doing predictions. So I'm just going to predict that this is going to be a good old fashioned, AFC, week 16, cold weather, late December game. I think it's going to come down to the wire. I think it's going to be a great battle, and I think it's going to be one of the best games all year for both teams. And I think it's just going to be a really fun, entertaining game. And so I think it's going to come down to the 2-minute area. And I think, honestly, whichever team might have the ball last, I think that might be the team that wins.
Well, let's play a hypothetical. If the Colts were to win this game, who would be the big performer in your opinion?
I think Rivers has to have a really good game. Defensively, I think they need to get some pressure. So, maybe a defensive lineman would have a good game. They might have to send some extra bodies at Roethlisberger to penetrate that offensive line. So it might be a guy like Darius, Leonard, or Bobby Okereke getting a sack. The thing about it, not to deviate a little bit, but the Pittsburgh Steelers around here, if you look at this game from a Colts perspective, like if you're a Colts fan heading into this game, the Steelers represent, they just bring up a lot of bad feelings if you're a Colts fan. I don't think there's a franchise that has had more success, more consistent success over the years over the Colts than the Steelers. So for a while there, if you're a Colts fan, man, like you just had the just disdain for New England. But now that rivalry's kind of fizzled out with Tom Brady leaving, and they haven't played each other the last couple of years. Now it's the Steelers, and the Steelers have won 20 of the last 23 matchups, 6 in a row. The Colts only have 2 wins on the road all time in Pittsburgh. Like, you're talking about a lot of nightmares if you're a Colts fan against that team and that franchise. And so I think it would just do wonders for this team. And again, you're talking about a group of guys that, they don't know about the history of the Colts Steelers all time. Like they've been here the last couple of years. So it's really, ignorance is bliss as far as that goes. But if you're a Colts fan, I think it would just help the psyche, the mentality to kind of break through and get a road win late in the season against a really good Pittsburgh team heading into the playoffs, knowing full well you might see them again in a couple weeks in the month of January. I think it would just be big for this team, for this franchise to get a win and erase some really bad memories over the years in Pittsburgh.
And Matt, we've been asking all the people that we've had on the show, and we have had on a play-by-play announcer before in Bram Weinstein of the Washington football team. So we're curious to know, how have you been able to adjust to COVID? We've known that basically team announcers, they couldn't go on the road, but they have been able to, go to the stadium and home.
Yeah, so we're in the same boat. We're not traveling out of precaution, trying to keep everybody safe. So we've done everything remotely for road games, and it's gone surprisingly well. And we knew this was a little bit of a possibility, back in the late spring, early summer. So we started researching it a little bit. So I like to think, among NFL teams, we were, jumping the gun a little bit, and we were in a good spot, in terms of logistics and technology and what we needed to pull it off. So when the time did come to get the official word that we couldn't travel with the team, we had kind of all of our ducks in a row. So the first game was right out of the gate. We had a road game, so none of us had ever done it before, and there's just so many things that you have to take into account. Logistically, you got to get with fiber companies and networks. You got to get with the league on permission on things, and you got to get the audio to sync up. I mean, I've just been so proud of our crew that we've been able to pull it off, and we've made it look hopefully easy by this point in the season. But early on, it was kind of choppy. That first game was good, not great, because again, none of us had ever done it before. But now that we have 8 or 9 games under our belt doing it this way, it's been good, and it's been a lot of fun. I've learned a lot within the process. I've picked up a lot of knowledge when it comes to TV lingo and understanding how that industry kind of works a little bit. So it's been fun as far as that goes. And so there's pros and cons to it. Pro is not traveling and being home with the family more on the weekends and things like that. Con is obviously not being at the game. And I always say when in a normal year when we travel, it stinks to be away from the family on Saturday and not having time to be around them or do things with them or just do life in general with running errands and things like that. So it's kind of a drag as far as that goes. But once you're at the game, like when Sunday rolls around and it's time for kickoff and you're in a packed stadium with 60,000 fans going crazy, there's no other place you'd rather be as a football fan or a broadcaster or anything like that. So not having that experience this year has been a little bit of a drag. But we're making do in a really bad situation, and I like to think we're pulling it off pretty well. We broadcast all of our games at Lucas Oil Stadium in the control room. That's the same room where they do all the in-house production stuff. Like they run the jumbotron, the ribbon board, and all that stuff. They do that in this control room. So that's where we are. We have 3 or 4 really giant TV monitors. We're watching the TV broadcasts. We're watching the all 22 feed at the same time. We got the audio synced up. So I like to think, as far as other teams that most teams are doing it remotely, I like to think nobody's doing it better than we are, and we're putting out a pretty good product to the point where a lot of people are saying, "Hey, I thought you weren't traveling this year." We're like, "Hey, we're not." That's how good we're doing with kind of fooling people that we're actually at the game and putting out a pretty good football experience on the radio.
And that's Matt Taylor, the play-by-play voice for the Indianapolis Colts. Matt, thanks for coming on the show, and happy holidays.
Yeah, you guys too. Appreciate it.
And that was Matt Taylor, the play-by-play voice for the Indianapolis Colts, and we thank him for being on the show. Well, Chris, it's time to do our predictions this week, and the less we talk about last week, the better. We both got those wrong, but I think most people in America and around the world would have doubted that the Steelers would lose that game.
We were both way off. I was pretty surprised by that, obviously by that Steelers loss to the Bengals. The way the Bengals have been playing and everything, they had the third-string quarterback, Ryan Finley, in there. I thought the Steelers would bounce back after 2 poor performances against the Washington football team and the Buffalo Bills, and man, they really hit rock bottom there in Cincinnati.
Yeah, it doesn't give you a lot of pleasant feelings about the Steelers' next 2 opponents, and this is going to be the first game on this podcast in which I will say the Steelers will lose.
Yeah, I agree with you. I have the Colts winning this game also. As far as the score, I'll say the Colts win. The defense usually doesn't give up that many points, so I want to say the Colts win 24-17, and Steelers continue to struggle scoring points offensively.
Yeah, this is going to have to be a prove-it game for me with the Steelers. I have it being 24-21 Colts. I think the Steelers' offense still doesn't get back on track, and even the second half against Cincinnati is viewed a little bit as a mirage, but this is a much better Colts team than what that Bengals squad is, at least in terms of names. You've heard us talk to Matt Taylor. He could name you just about everyone on that Colts defense. And yeah, it's just that I don't have any good vibes from the Steelers' performance against the Bengals, especially in comparison to just how that first half was. The run game did get itself going a little bit, but the Colts have the best run defense in the AFC. And I just don't see anything right now that can make me say that, yes, they can win this game with confidence.
Yeah, I'll be surprised if they run the ball against this Colts run defense. DeForest, Buckner, as Matt mentioned, has been amazing for the Colts this season. And they have 3 players on their defensive line with 7.5 sacks. So you also have to look at that, especially after the way the Steelers' offensive line performed against the Bengals, especially at the tackles positions. Alejandro Villanueva and Corafor, they really struggled in that game against the Bengals, and they're going to be playing a really good Colts defensive line on Sunday. Yeah, just across the board, the Colts have playmakers on defense. Like you mentioned, it doesn't set up a real good matchup.
So let's do this, because we usually have big performers in a Steelers win for us, especially for me this season. If the Steelers were to beat the Colts, who would be, in your opinion, the driving factors?
I'll probably get the run game going if, James Conner plays this game, probably along with Benny Snell Jr. He had a good game too, so we'll have to see how that works out. If, maybe they give Snell more carries. And then the receivers too. They need Claypool to, get more touches or start making explosive plays. That's really the thing. They need to start making those chunk plays, because the offense right now is just like, if they do score, it's long drives.
Yeah, they're going to need more chunk plays. Maybe a couple more chunk plays like Snell had against Cincinnati. And, of course, Claypool with the ball on that screen that set up the first touchdown for the Steelers. Basically, right now, the Colts have a good secondary. And I think it's really time for Ben to just say, you know what, guys? I'm going to throw this up, and you guys got to make a play. You guys got to make me look good, because right now, Ben Roethlisberger isn't looking good.
Yeah, he didn't see the field well against the Bengals, especially in the first half. To his credit, he did play better in the second half, but and his deep ball has just been awful this year. Just to be brutally honest, I guess it's just he's pretty good in the 20-yard margin, but once it goes over like 30-40 yards, it's just like he rarely gets any completions.
I guess we can both agree with this, that we're confident in the defense, no matter what, being able to at least slow down an offense long enough that hopefully the Steelers' offense can do something this week, though it's really going to help if the Steelers score on their early chances. But in terms of defense, I'll never doubt that defense no matter who's out, because somehow, some way, they make enough plays where the Steelers' offense can either A, get back into the game and make it competitive, or B, win the game with just enough offense to get by.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, anytime you have players like T.J. Watt and Minka Fitzpatrick in their defense, you have a chance, obviously. But I think they have to get pressure on Phillip Rivers and force some like ill-advised passes, because he is capable of throwing bad passes or interceptions. I know he's been playing really well lately. 6 touchdowns and no interceptions in his last 3 games, but that's going to be a really good matchup between the Steelers front against the Colts offensive line, because they haven't played an offensive line this good, all season. They have Quentin Nelson, Ryan Kelly, 2 pro ballers. So it should be an interesting matchup in the trenches.
Absolutely. So the Steelers will look to get off the schneid against the Indianapolis Colts in their home finale at Heinz Field, 1 p.m. on CBS. It should be an exciting game. It'll be an exciting game, and hopefully the Steelers can finally clinch the AFC North. And that's all for us. For Chris Ward and the rest of the Renegade Blitz staff, I'm Ty Polk. Thank you for tuning in to the Renegade Blitz. Thank you for listening to the Renegade Blitz Podcast. Follow us on Twitter at Renegade Blitz, read articles on renegadeblitz.com, and like us on Facebook. Our podcast is available on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Stitcher, YouTube, iHeart, and Spotify.